Hey guys, how's it going? It's Danconia, and welcome back to the Overwatch League Roundup, and the top 3 most improved teams in 2019. So, I wanted to do this video a while back and then it kind of slipped my mind, so I apologise for that. But, we're going to look at the teams that I think improved the most from the inaugural season into the 2019 or the second season of the Overwatch League. Now, obviously there are some caveats to this. In the inaugural season we had 12 teams, so I can only look at those 12 teams. So, the 8 teams that joined last year, so those are the Hangzhou Spark, the Atlanta Reign, the Guangzhou Charge, the Chengdu Hunters, the Paris Eternal, the Toronto Defiant, the Washington Justice, the Vancouver Titans, all can't be used in this because basically we've got no inaugural season knowledge to go off of because they didn't exist. So that's where we were rolling with that. So we were going to take this out of the pool of 12 inaugural teams. So that's New York Excelsior, the Los Angeles Valiant, Boston Uprising, Los Angeles Gladiators, London Spitfire, Philadelphia Fusion, Houston Outlaws, Seoul Dynasty, San Francisco Shock, Dallas Fuel, Florida Mayhem, and Shanghai Dragons. So, top 3 teams that have improved the most. Now, at number 3, I had a bit of a debate with myself, because I was weighing up over 2 teams. These were the New York Excelsior and the Seoul Dynasty. Now, it was a difficult one to choose from, and mainly it's come down to playoff performance. I have gone for the Seoul Dynasty at number 3. And the reason is because New York Excelsior, I was literally about to put them in at number 3. But when you think about it, New York Excelsior, their actual playoff record, has kind of regressed since the inaugural season. That is because obviously there's some real top teams in the league right now, and there's a lot more competition, and New York Excelsior had to keep up with that, and they did. I honestly think the skill level of New York Excelsior has improved during this season. But their playoffs, they have not won a stage playoffs in 2019. They won't ever win a stage playoff again because stage playoffs won't exist. But they did win 2 stage playoffs in the inaugural season. And although they did flop badly in the overall playoffs of the inaugural season, and actually they did give a good account of themselves in this overall playoffs, I don't think that's enough of an improvement for me to put them in over the Seoul Dynasty. Now, when you look at the Seoul Dynasty, they actually got exactly the same placing this year as they did in the inaugural season. They finished 8th. Although in the inaugural season, that put them in the lower half of the league. In this season, that put them in the higher half of the league into the play-ins. And in the inaugural season, we didn't see Seoul Dynasty in the playoffs. They failed miserably, and it was a big, big surprise, considering they were obviously this big lunatic high roster coming in at that point. And although they weren't that far away from the likes of London Spitfire and Philadelphia Fusion, they were only 2 wins away in the inaugural season. They did fail to live up to the hype that we expected, because a lot of people in the inaugural season expected Seoul Dynasty to win the league. And yeah, they were far from it. So I think they've improved a lot. Coming into the 2019 season, and the results show that. They got into stage playoffs, they beat New York Excelsior in stage playoffs. They didn't win the stage playoffs, but I don't think that was expected, really, when you looked at Seoul. The San Francisco Shock and the Vancouver Titans and the rest were all just so good. I don't think we expected Seoul to win the stage playoffs at any point, but they did show a marked improvement on the inaugural season performances they were putting out. But what tipped me over the line for Seoul Dynasty, they got to the play-ins, right? So they got into that play-in tournament with a chance to get to the playoffs at the end of the season. Not only that, they got through that play-in tournament. And I had my doubts that they would get through that play-in tournament. I really did. I'm not going to lie. But what impressed me is they actually fairly swiftly and easily beat the Guangzhou Charge. And coming into the play-ins at the time, Guangzhou Charge were a strong team. They'd just come off the back of a 4-1 win over the Chengdu Hunters, and Guangzhou were really in form. And I honestly expected Guangzhou to beat the Seoul Dynasty, and the Seoul Dynasty turned up for, I think, probably the first time, apart from when we saw them in the stage playoffs earlier in the season. For the first time, Seoul Dynasty turned up and got a job done, and got a job done well, right? Beating the Guangzhou Charge at that time 4-1, I don't think anyone expected. Everyone expected that to be much, much closer, but they got through. So this meant Seoul Dynasty actually did reach the overall playoffs, which is great for the Seoul Dynasty, and it shows marked improvement. Unfortunately, they came in and had to play the Vancouver Titans, and that's a whole different ballgame. But I think this gave me enough incentive to put them above the New York Excelsior, Because the New York Excelsior, yes, had improved in the playoffs, but apart from that, I'm not sure whether I could have put them over the Seoul Dynasty, even though Seoul Dynasty's league standing wasn't massively better than it was last season. But the next two are clear improvements. So, at number 2, it's the San Francisco Shock. And it might be a surprise to some people that I haven't put the Shock as number 1 on this list, but I think there's only one team I could have put at number 1 on this list. We'll get onto that in a minute. But the San Francisco Shock are a story in themselves, aren't they? Let's be honest. So, in the inaugural season, if you didn't look at the inaugural season, the San Francisco Shock were in the bottom half of the league. They came 9th, and there was a big gap between 9th and 8th. We just talked about Seoul. They were in 8th, and they had a 22-18 record. In 9th, we had the San Francisco Shock, who had a 17-23 record. So they had a negative record, right? San Francisco Shock were not seen as a very good team. But the San Francisco Shock were playing the long game. So if you think about the San Francisco Shock back then, when the inaugural season started, they had Super and Sinatra, but they were ineligible because they weren't old enough to play. But they had players like Dak and Dante and IDDQD, Baby Bay, Sleepy and Nomi. Nomi's no longer in the league anymore, nor is Sleepy, I don't believe. Baby Bay's now with the Atlanta Reign and still a very good player. Dante is with the Houston Outlaws. So it was a very different looking Shock, right? This Shock team wasn't a brilliant team. It wasn't trash. It wasn't a Florida Mayhem, but it wasn't good enough to be up with the likes of the 2 LA teams, Boston, London, the likes of that. They just couldn't compete on that level. But San Francisco and the organisers, NRG, were very quick to act on this. And towards the end of the inaugural season, Sinatra and Super became eligible, which made a big difference to the San Francisco Shock, and they signed Krusty from the very good Boston Uprising. Krusty is a coach, if you didn't know. And Krusty, I really believe, is one of the most pivotal parts to the transformation of the San Francisco Shock. And you so slowly, towards the end of the inaugural season, saw San Francisco Shock improve. But they were never going to be able to make up the ground because they were just so far behind. They'd already the writing was already on the wall for the inaugural season for San Francisco Shock, but it wasn't going to be the end of the world because, of course, we had another season coming. And yeah, San Francisco Shock changed. A lot of transfers. We saw Choi Hyobin come in season 1 as well, the inaugural season as well. And the whole roster, basically, apart from Sinatra and Super and Moth, apart from the people that they brought in during that season, it changed. They brought in people like Striker and Violet and Rascal and Smurf. And we saw a vastly different San Francisco Shock. And along with the top-tier coaching staff that they've got now, it sparked an absolute surge from the Shock. And obviously, as we know, the Shock came second in the standings this year, only losing out to the Vancouver Titans. But honestly, if the league had been... So the league in its inaugural season was 40 matches long, and this year it was 28. If it had been those 40 matches long, I think the San Francisco Shock would have overtaken the Vancouver Titans. I don't think anyone would have stopped the Shock. And of course, they are Overwatch League winners for this year. No one could stop them, could they? In the end, I mean, I know Vancouver did stop them at the start of the season, but things were starting... They weren't as fluid at the start of the season for San Francisco Shock as they were at the end. And at the end, San Francisco were just incredible. I mean, they only lost in the playoffs to the Atlanta Reign, and it was almost like a catalyst for a run that I don't think we'll ever see again. I mean, they absolutely obliterated the losers bracket in the overall playoffs. It was incredible, knocking out the ex-champions London Spitfire and New York Excelsior as well. It was an incredible run. An incredible run. And an absolutely massive, stark contrast to the San Francisco Shock we saw in the inaugural season. And it's off the back of them looking at two players like Super and Sinatra and saying, these guys will be good in the future. They may not be eligible for us at the start of the inaugural season, but let's get these guys tied down. Let's make them our star players of the future. And then this year, it's reaped so many rewards for the San Francisco Shock. I mean, they have all paid their way, you know, wage-wise and stuff like that with the performances they put on stage. Because, damn, I mean, they got Sinatra, who's MVP and World Cup MVP now as well. They've got a playoff-winning MVP off-tank in Choi Hyobin. And I still think Shock are the best team in the league. When I look at all the transfers that have been going on recently as well, I still think the Shock are the best team in the league. And I don't know who's going to stop them. I think we need a surprise package, and I don't know who that's going to be at the moment. The only team that has made so many drastic changes that I cannot predict is London Spitfire. I really don't know where that team's going to fall. So that's the only team that I think can challenge the Shock if it works, and that's a big, big if. But the Shock come in at 2, so who comes in at number 1? It's obviously the Shanghai Dragons, isn't it? I don't think it could be anyone else. The worst losing streak in history is what the Shanghai Dragons were on coming into this season. And it's a story. It's a great story, isn't it? It's just incredible what the Shanghai Dragons have done. So, backstory. Shanghai Dragons, in the inaugural season, I said it was 40 matches long. They didn't win any of them. They went 0-40. And Shanghai Dragons became a meme. Let's be honest, they became a meme. The team that couldn't win, no matter how hard they tried, no matter how hard they were worked, believe it or not, they just couldn't win. And there were times during the inaugural season that we thought, is this the day that the Shanghai Dragons win their first ever Overwatch League match? And it never ever came. And we reached the end of the season and Shanghai Dragons were 0-40 with a minus 120 map differential. And it will never happen again, I don't think. I really don't think it will ever happen again. We've got some difficult and bad teams in the league now, but nothing like that Shanghai Dragons team. Nothing like it. But Shanghai obviously had to act on this. You know, you don't pay a massive amount of money to get into this league to do what Shanghai Dragons did in the inaugural season. So things had to change. A massive overhaul at the Shanghai Dragons occurred once again, moving away from a Chinese roster and more to a Korean roster, and it paid dividends. Shanghai Dragons did not finish bottom of the league this year. They won their first game, or first Overwatch League match as a franchise in Stage 1, and they managed to grab an 11th place finish this year. Now, granted, it's a similar change to what San Francisco Shock achieved, right? But Shanghai Dragons, I think it's just more monumental, the absolute scale of the job that needed to be done there. And to cap it all off, they won Stage 3. They beat the San Francisco Shock, and they won the Stage 3 title this year. And that is the last stage title. There will never be another stage title. The format has now changed so that stages don't exist. So that title is Shanghai Dragons, and there will never be another one to win that title. So congratulations to the Shanghai Dragons for that. And again, if you want to add to the monumental improvements, and it's similar to the Seoul Dynasty, when we look at the playoffs, they reached the play-ins. They reached the play-ins for this year, which again is a monumental achievement for a team that went 0-40 in the inaugural season. I mean, the comeback story couldn't have been much bigger unless they had actually won the league this year. Or, albeit granted, they did come into the play-ins, they beat the Philadelphia Fusion, then they did narrowly lose to the holders at the time, which were London Spitfire. And it was a 4-3. It was very close. And what was great about the Shanghai Dragons is they did show us some very comps. They weren't quite Chengdu Hunters, let's be honest, but they weren't Vancouver Titans or the San Francisco Shock, who were very, very, on the meta. Shanghai Dragons were, they were capable of throwing us for a bit of a loop, if you see what I mean, in terms of what they were going to play. And they've got some really, really good players. And I tell you what, yes, they didn't make it to the overall playoffs, but this year coming, I think the Shanghai Dragons have improved again. And I think they've improved massively again. So, who knows what could be in store for the team from Shanghai next year, because I really, really think that the Shanghai Dragons could be a dark horse for 2020, because they have made some really, really good signings. Really good signings. And there could be changes yet. But those are my top 3. So number 3 was the Seoul Dynasty, number 2 was the San Francisco Shock, and number 1 was obviously the Shanghai Dragons. I will probably do another video which will be the top teams that have gone down in our estimates. So the teams that have got worse since the inaugural season. there are some very obvious candidates for that one, so we can take a look at that very, very soon. Also, a bit of news. Obviously, it's now December, so all of the Christmas stuff is going to go up around the channel, and I've got to say goodbye to this microphone, because I am changing this microphone for the first time in 3 years. So that's great. I'm hoping to bring you better audio quality, which is really, really fantastic and something I've wanted to do for a very long time. So tomorrow's video should be better quality. But for now, thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you'd like to give it a like, subscribe if you're new, and I will see you in the next video. See you then.